Reaction comes from Marilyn Hawes, founder and chief executive of the charity Freedom from Abuse. He had to go, Marilyn, didn't he?
Well, he should have had the dignity and the integrity to have gone a long time ago. I met him at Lambeth Palace in 2013 before the ICSA inquiry started. And we had a 90-minute conversation about abuse in the church and how I was pushing for the independent inquiry to look at the church first. And he is weak, he's woke, he has no spine. And I'm sorry, I actually don't quite agree with what Graham Nichols said earlier. The institution is as much to blame. Yes, of course, it's the harm of the victims who have to now relive it all over again. I don't like the word survivors because a lot of people don't survive, actually. A lot of people end up taking their own life. And in any organisation, if you heard the expression of fish rots from the head down, this is true with the church. This has caused a lot of harm for the church. You've also got the problem of the bishops, the House of Bishops. They have absolute autocracy. They don't seem to take any direction or lead from the Archbishop of Canterbury, whoever that may be. But the church has lost its way. And time again, I have heard Welby huff and puff about the indignities and the dreadfulness of abuse in the church and then does nothing. I have trained, I had the privilege, I don't know whether it was a privilege, I'm not sure it was, to train every single senior safeguarding officer in the Church of England up at York Minster. I have never met a more arrogant, toxic group of people than I meet in my everyday life when I'm doing training. And
in what way, Marilyn? In what way?
There were a lot of former social workers. They had their phones on. They weren't really listening. They thought they knew it all. I just found it absolutely awful. And I actually did make a point of meeting who was then the Bishop of Durham, Paul Butler. I made a complaint about it and I went to see him at the House of Lords. But this is why, again, we need mandatory reporting. You know, it's dreadful that he didn't take a stand on this. And as I say, the institution is to blame. You can't deny it. The thing is, I don't know where you go from this now, other than the fact, who is going to be the next Archbishop of Canterbury? I have to say, when my children were harmed by a Church of England head teacher, it was then Rowan Williams. He was no better either. He had no spine. It remains, I truly do believe, I've seen it in my own church. I live in a little village and I've seen it there. It still remains the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to deal with it. Nobody wants to grow a spine and draw a line under it. And someone has got to actually, who takes any leadership in the church, have to actually probably start reading the Gospels and understand what the meaning is.
So if the institution is to blame, what should happen to the institution to make good?
Well, they have to have some really decent leader at the top. This man has never been a leader. I don't know, he might have been an academic. Rowan Williams was an academic. But you have to have someone this is the Church of England. And someone who actually puts a stake in the ground and speaks out for this is fundamentally wrong. Children being sexually abused, people being domestically abused, abuse of any description is fundamentally against the Christian faith. And all the stuff that goes on, the stabbings in young people, all this stuff that goes on in our society today, where is the leader of the church? Nowhere to be seen. And when I met him, he told me he was responsible, that he wasn't the Pope. Well, I know I'm not stupid. I mean, I know he's not the Pope. I was brought up a Catholic, but then went to the Church of England. But he said, I don't have any influence over the bishops because they have autocracy of their own diocese. Well, that shouldn't be. And I said, but, at the end of the day, you have influence. Surely you should be influencing your bishops about abuse and the wrongness of this. And it's not just the Church of England. You've only got to look at the Catholic Church. I mean, it's just where there are children and where there is power and control and opportunity, this will happen.
You got the impression, Marilyn, that even as Archbishop of Canterbury, he couldn't apparently do anything to disrupt the autocracy or the independence of the bishops in their little world, whatever the hell they do, in order to protect children.
That's what he told me. Basically, that's what he told me. And I remember saying to him, well, that's just not good enough. That is absolutely not good enough. And I'd gone just recently on the bounce of having sorted my own thing out with my own children's abuse. It was the Church of England. I met the paedophile in the church. I had no support from the church at all. It was absolutely horrendous, and nothing's really changed. They just ignore. They hope the victims are going to go away and keep their mouth shut. And it's absolutely horrendous. I actually said to Justin Welby, and if he was an honest man, he would remember me saying it. I said, "You are the Archbishop of Canterbury. If you died tonight and you went up, to the pearly gates, and there's Michael up there letting you in, are you going to come in or not? What is your legacy on earth?" And so you don't need to answer me right now, but let me tell you what mine is. My children were sexually abused. I was a church member all my life. I was not supported by the church. I have done this in my life for 23 years. I don't get much for it. I don't get any funding from the government, no. But I know if I die tonight and the pearly gates are open, I can say I've run this charity for 23 years called Freedom from Abuse, and it has rescued people. We have been an advocate for people. What are you going to say? Oh, I looked after 80 million people around the world. Whoopie-dee, you get paid for it. But you're not doing what the Church of England in England needs from you. And I was really firm, because I don't take prisoners. I am passionate about it. I think it's outrageous that this has happened, especially when we had the ICSA inquiry. And he was supposed to be, I went to the Sunday Times when I met him, and I said, "So you are telling me in 2013, you are telling me that when the ICSA thing starts in 2014, you are going to push for the church to be looked at first and all its failings?" He said, "Yes." So I thought, right, let's talk to the Sunday Times. I was on the front page of the Sunday Times. Lambeth Palace took exception to it, wrote me a letter and said, what was I doing? I said, what I was doing was saying what he told me should happen, unless, of course, he doesn't mean it. Why are you, I was so angry.
I'm sure, Marilyn. I can well imagine. Can I read you this? This is just bringing in some of the reaction to what Welby has done this afternoon in his resignation. And I saw this tweet from Rory Stewart, who, I mean, to be fair to him, hasn't had a particularly good 10 days when it comes to getting things right. Rory Stewart has said this: "Very sorry to hear of the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury. I have worked with him for a long time, have always been struck by his humility, openness, care and sense of public service." Were you struck by those things, Marilyn Hawes?
Not at all. Not at all. I was on GB News this morning, and I was on with Eamon Holmes and Isabel, who said he was devout and this, that and the other. How do you know? Have you never met him? Who knows who's what? I don't see that at all. Humble man, nice man. I met him, nice man. Useless at what he did. I'm sorry, I'm happy to say it. And I say it as a person who is a Christian, practicing Christian, and goes to church. Goodness knows why I go. I'll tell you what, I never put any money in the pot because I have so little respect. I've never lost my faith. But I am so irritated, annoyed, and disappointed at everything, what he's done and not done. Not just him, but Rowan Williams as well. It's just outrageous, the harm they have caused.
It's institutional failure. It's complete institutional failure from the top down.